Welcome to A Cup of Gratitude with Amanda Schaefer. Hi, I'm your host, and I'm so glad you stopped by. This podcast is really for anyone, anywhere, anytime. And it's about taking a moment to slow down and look around and actually see all of the good things that are there. There's no question that asks, is your cup half empty or half full? But I think a better question is, what's in your cup? I mean, a drop of gratitude will benefit your life unimaginably more than a full cup of anything else. So let's settle in and take a look at how we can shift our focus and embrace the joy and the wonder of the life that we have. And once you start, you won't be able to stop seeing the good. And just like me, you won't be able to stop talking about it. And somehow that creates even more. Even in the midst of difficulty, even when it's really hard. Learn how to drink from a cup of gratitude.
Welcome. Today we are speaking with Angela Farlow. Angela currently works as the communications manager for a nonprofit called Chariots for Hope. She grew up in Quincy, Illinois, along the Mississippi River in a family of 6. When looking at where to go to college for communications, she decided to stay in the Midwest and attend a Christian school in Ohio called Cedarville University. There, Angela was able to work through hurt that she experienced growing up in a split home, as well as learn more about what a relationship with Christ really looked like. She met people that loved her and helped her shape into the woman that she is today. After she graduated, she was willing to go wherever God wanted her to, and God led her here to Pennsylvania to work with an organization that serves and loves vulnerable children in Kenya, Africa. Wow, that's an amazing beginning. Angela, welcome.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. You know, it's really funny. We go to the same church, but yet we've never met, but we know somebody in common, and that's how we met. And I just love how God connects me to these stories that he wants me to share. So I'm real excited to meet you in person one day.
Yes.
So I like to start at the beginning. Would you tell us a little bit about your childhood?
Yeah. So I am the oldest of 4 siblings. So I have 2 brothers and a little sister. So that's kind of shaped a little bit of who I am as being the oldest. I grew up in Quincy, Illinois, which you said, with 2 parents. And my grandpa actually was a pastor at a local church in the area. And that's kind of where I first learned about God and just getting to serve alongside my family. And yeah, that was kind of my childhood. I mean, as I grew up, God kind of threw in some things in there.
Yeah.
My parents kind of separating during that time and losing a close family member. And those are also some experiences that shaped my childhood. But overall, really awesome how I can see that has formed me in who I am today.
Yeah. Isn't it funny how even the fissures and the broken places somehow, once we're in Christ, end up making us more able to minister to others and to see God's presence during those difficult times?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, you had told me during our pre-recording call that you began to actually question things about church and faith when you were in middle school. Do you think you know why?
Yeah, I think the main motivation for that is when you grow up in a Christian home, you look up to the people, you look up to your parents. I mentioned my grandpa's a pastor. I looked up to him to kind of define what faith was. And
Right.
I think when you hear about that all the time, it grows comfortable. And you're like, oh, yes, I know the gospel. I know that Jesus died on the cross for my sins. But then when some of those people that you look up to start, in your eyes, failing, you're like, wait, they're supposed to be the example. Like they're the people I'm following almost more than my own faith. And so I think in middle school, that's when I started to question, like, is this
Yeah.
something that is actually my own, or is this something that I've just done because it's what's been told to me and what's been taught to me and shown to me? And so middle school just happened to be the years that I started experiencing some of those real life, hurts and tornadoes that were kind of being thrown my way. But it was through working on that and finding my faith on my own that I think grew that so much deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone's faith has to be their own. At some point in time, you're supposed to question. You're supposed to pick up what you choose to pick up and lay down what you choose to lay down, or it's
Yeah.
not really yours.
Yeah.
Now, your parents got a divorce, and as divorce often is, it was messy.
Mm.
And you had said that a lot of hurtful things happened. But right there in the midst of all that brokenness, you said that God got a hold of your heart. I think
Mhm.
that's really beautiful. How did that happen? How did he get a hold of you?
Yeah. So, I'm really thankful to my mom. She continued to bring us to church, in spite of a lot of things going on.
Hmm.
And so I still was hearing that gospel message, but I think it was through my involvement in church. So I started attending the youth group, and the youth group, we put on these like a VBS kind of thing, so a vacation Bible
Hmm.
school for young kids. And we
Right.
also led camps in the summer. And that in itself, I just love. Like, that's totally up my alley. And then also just with the bringing in the gospel into that, I think
Yeah.
that's when I really saw the power of the gospel with these little kids. Like, childlike faith is such a real thing. To see these
Yeah.
kids just grasp onto these messages and just singing about loving the Lord. And I think that was what really encouraged me. I also just met some really sweet friends that also had those same motivations, and they are huge encouragements that I still talk to them to this day. And they really just walked those roads with me in high school.
Oh, that's really lovely. When you were talking about the children and how they just grasp on kind of without abandon, just totally open, and they hear the truth and they receive it. It reminds me of when you do go into third world countries on
Mm,
mission and you are talking with these people that might not even speak your language with an interpreter, but they hear that truth and bam, they
mm,
just connect with it and open up to it. And I think here in the States, there's just so much other stuff in the way,
mm.
that we don't see that as much. I think that's wonderful that your servant heart is where you connected. I think that happens with a lot of us. When we serve others, that's
Mm,
when we start to really understand the goodness of Jesus serving us.
yeah.
Yeah. So your grandfather seems like he was a real gift from God
Mm.
for you during those years. Did he seem like your safe place, like your solid place at the time?
He was definitely one of them, for sure. And, looking back to it, one of the hurts that I experienced in high school was losing my grandma, who was
Okay.
actually his wife.
Yeah.
So I think, he of course experienced that hurt on a whole nother level than I did, losing his wife at a young age. But I think it was through that, he was like, I see these people in my life, I see my granddaughter, and he really, used that to be so intentional with me. I
Mm.
remember, like, when I was having a hard time with losing her, I would call him, which,
Yeah.
looking back on that, I'm like, oh man, I bet that was hard for him, like, to try to comfort me. But yeah, no, he would always point me back to Christ, and he always would just listen. I think that was one of the
Yeah.
biggest things I learned from him, is just listening. And then also just an encouragement too, especially like transitioning into college, as well.
Yeah, it's very important to have those people who you can just really feel like you were heard, and
Yeah.
you can empty out what needs to come out, and know that it's safe. I I love the fact that you realized later that maybe going to him might have been difficult for him, but
Mm,
he never did anything but push through that. And I think maybe being there for you, you actually helped him process some things.
yeah.
Yeah. So you went to college,
Hmm.
and when you graduated, you had told me that you realized suddenly, and I don't think we think of it while we're there, that you could go anywhere you wanted and you could kind of do anything that you chose to do. So what did you end up doing?
Yeah, so college was a great experience. I was still in the Midwest, but I was about 8 hours from home, so it was still a transition of. It was a
Yeah.
healthy transition to get to move from kind of where I grew up, and all of, everyone knowing everything about me, and then kind of moving into this new place, where I kind
Right.
of had to find who I was, kind of get to be involved in things that I wanted to get involved in and really grow.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at my college experience. I mean, the testimony of me even getting to college was just amazing. I chose to go to Cedarville University, which is a private school, so it's a little costly. And I
Mm-hmm.
was pursuing a art, Bachelor of Art Communications degree, which is a degree that you can get at many schools. But I
Right.
just really felt like the Lord was like, go to Cedarville, go to Cedarville. And I didn't really necessarily feel like I had strong support going there from my parents. But my grandpa, when we mentioned him, he was a person that was like, no, Angela, I think this is great. Like, I'm going to support you in going to school here. And
Wow.
I just remembered kind of taking that bold step. And it's so funny, talking about it and looking back, like, oh man, financially, I don't know if that was the best decision. I had like less than $1,000 in my bank account. But my grandpa really helped me like think through those decisions. And the Lord provided above and beyond for me
Wow.
to be at Cedarville. And I mean, yes, and just in incredible ways. So I think from getting to school there, and this is a Christian school, I just knew that this would be transformative years of my life, and it definitely was. So like through learning, I came in actually wanting to go corporate, like public relations. Like I thought,
Right.
the office life was for me. But I got involved in youth group at my church, and I started to get involved in volunteering in some other avenues at Cedarville that worked with kids. And it was that my heart started getting really softened for,
Mm-hmm.
I want to work a job that is like loving and just serving these vulnerable kids that can't necessarily advocate for themselves,
Yeah.
and sharing the gospel with them, because that's what's going to transform their lives. And I'd seen that with my involvement through my college experience. So I think it was through that motivation of changing kind of the outlook on my life is when I was like, all right, I can like serve the Lord anywhere. I'm in a great place financially, thanks to thanks to God and my grandpa and working
Right.
in many jobs, and then also just relationally, I was, I could just go anywhere. And so I was like, all right, a job right now is a large part of my life and my time. So I'm going to just kind of give that over to God. And so I just started, thinking through where the best place would be after school with those kind of intentions.
That's powerful that you were
Yeah.
able to hear God and allow him to kind of flip the switch from what you wanted to do originally, what made sense to you as a plan, and do his plan. And that he started to fill your heart with that feeling that we all get when we're walking in the calling of what he's asked us to do. And it's indescribable. I often have people tell me that they think Christianity is boring. And I always say, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. It is not boring at all. So I could just hear the exuberance and the encouragement, and the excitement that you had to do what God had for you to do. And it's clear, having talked to you before, and when people listen right now, that is exactly the plan he had for you. So you
Mhm.
applied for jobs and you got
Mhm.
contacted by someone that was 8 hours away. But at the same time, your dad also offered you a position. Were you
Yeah.
conflicted by that? Or how did
Yeah.
you feel?
Yeah, I know. It's kind of it makes me laugh a little bit because finding a job is a daunting task, because you're
Yeah.
like, this is a huge transition. Like where you choose the job is where you're gonna live, where the people you're gonna be.
Hmm.
And I remember having a conversation with my dad, and he does real estate and he owns his own business, and he's very
Hmm.
successful and doing really well. And I was just talking about him, like, digital media, communications, it's my thing. So I was like, like, this is cool, you can do this and that. And I think he started to see the need for a position like that. And so
Hmm.
he did form this position. He's like, Angela, I'd like to offer this to you. And it was a good paying job, especially as right out of school. And he was going to help me with, further education. And I was kind of like, whoa, like this is a legit offer.
Right.
But taking that offer was a little bit more than just a job for me, because it was choosing to go back to my hometown, and
Right.
just, enter some hard dynamics. And I do have a 14-year-old sister, and I love her so dearly. And so, there was a motivational factor to be there for her and get to
Right.
get to see her grow up in her high school years. But there was just still kind of this I don't know if this is right. I don't know. So I asked for a week for my dad just to think about it. And,
Mm-hmm.
he's like, yep, that's fine. And I talked to a lot of mentors, and I was just telling them this turmoil in my heart of it's so good. Why would I not just immediately say yes?
Yeah.
What is causing me to think through? And
Yeah.
I think and I mentioned this, but I think a huge motivation was this was, it is a job, but to me, it's the job itself. I'm not necessarily outwardly preaching the gospel and serving kids, which is what I'd
That's
felt in
right.
my heart that I wanted to do. But it was almost like the Lord was but look at all this money and fancy, sparkly things, So I did eventually come to the conclusion all right, I think this is a good place. I think I can serve my sister and those things. And I
Right.
decided in my heart I was ready to say yes. And
Mm-hmm.
the next morning I woke up and my dad had withdrawn that offer.
Wow.
And yeah, and for reasons that he stated to me, but it was strange because I didn't feel oh, I wasn't, good enough for the position. I wasn't feeling those
Right.
types of things, but more so Lord, why did you make me wrestle with this for a whole week and even leading up to that, and just to let it go. And I think I just came back to the conclusion I just needed to be open and willing to do whatever the Lord wanted me to do. That's kind of what the lesson I felt I drew from that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and so from there, I kind of was all right, you know what you want to do, so start just applying for positions that fill those things. And so you did mention my job now is 8
Yeah.
hours away from Ohio, which is even 16 hours away from Illinois. But
Wow.
I saw this position, and I think the story about this position is incredible because I found it. I applied for it late one night. It was actually my mentor, my sweet, my sweet mentor. She's like, Angela, you just need to apply for jobs. Just start applying. And I was like, okay. So that night, I applied for this job, and the next day, the CEO emailed me back and was like, I'd like to interview you. And I was like, what? Because most jobs that I had been applying for at this point, you go through this whole portal
Right.
process and all of these
Right.
these questions that you're copying and pasting from my general answers. And then I interviewed with the CEO, and then that Friday she's like, I'd like you to interview with my team. And I was like, wow, okay, next step, that's great. So I interviewed with the team, and then she emailed me and said, hey, I'd like you to come out in person for an interview next week. So it was crazy. In the course of a week
Yeah.
and a half, I was traveling out to the East Coast. I've never been this far east ever in my life. So just by faith, I'm driving out here. But truly, it was the motivation of what Chariots for Hope does, and just the way that the gospel is just the center of everything that they do. And they're serving these kids that just come from really hard situations. That was the motivation factor. So I came and
That's
interviewed, and then they
That's
offered me the job.
amazing. I mean, what a conflict. I mean, you were conflicted already by the first proposal from your dad, and you wrestled with that, and you really listened, and then you got to the point where you're like, okay, I can do this. And then the option's taken away.
Yeah.
And then you're pushed to wrestle again with, okay, I'm going to put myself out there. It really sounds like God was kind of strengthening you and helping you. I mean, God wrestles in the Bible with people, and
Yeah.
I really just I feel like He was giving you this opportunity to really come to the conclusions that you needed to come to on your own. I love how God gives us choice.
Mm.
You know how He still, even though you knew very much what you thought you wanted to do, He still gives us choices, and in some ways, and we didn't talk about this before, but it's just what's popping into my mind. In some ways, we can do something that we think is good, and it is good, but it's not exactly what God was asking us to do. My dad's 91, and when he was in his youth group, which is why it's coming to mind, he has this story about that they told the kids at that time about this guy who had a dream. And in the dream, it was GPC. And he kept having it and kept having it. And he lived in a little town and he felt like he was being called to go preach the gospel. So he went to school to become a pastor. He did that. He came back. He was pastor of the little church. And things just didn't seem like they were going the way that he thought they were going to be once he did all that work. And he started having the dream again, GPC. And he said, God, I don't understand. I'm doing what you asked me to do. And God revealed to him at that time, it was go plant corn. The people needed to eat. And he wanted him to be a farmer. So I think sometimes God allows us to kind of really struggle with what exactly is the best thing. And sometimes it is something that we don't expect. And that's the way he was preaching the gospel. He was doing it by keeping the people fed, and then he could talk to them about Jesus. That story always stuck with me because I kind of see in your story how God was allowing you to wrestle with the things and really hear what he wanted you to do.
Yeah.
You told me that you would love to run your own nonprofit someday. And I think that's amazing. I mean, how cool, your first job out of college is at a nonprofit. I mean, so could you tell us a little more about what you actually do there? What is your job?
Yeah, so right now my job is a communications manager. So that's the title, but we are a small team. So we do wear a lot of hats. So I
Right.
basically do manage a lot of the communications to our donors, so a lot on the US side, but I also manage the child sponsorship program that we have, where we allow people to be matched up with specific kids and they get to be very part of their lives. But there's a lot of communication, that goes back and forth between Kenya and here. Yeah, and then just kind of leading up a lot of other little things. So we have we're going to Kenya soon and we have a package campaign. So I'm communicating to donors to send in the packages and making sure they're all there and packing them up. So lots of different things, but my hand is, mostly in how are we communicating to our donors.
Wow. Now, I was going to ask you, and I think I know the answer. Do you yourself get to go to Kenya?
Yes. Yep. So it's
Wow.
crazy. I moved here in May and then I got to go on my first trip in August. So, and yes, I get to go again multiple times a year, which is very cool.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So what was it like, seeing as your communications major and you're doing communications for your job? What was it like trying to communicate for the first time you went to Kenya without knowing the language?
Yes. I after my first trip, a question a lot of my, friends and family asked is, what is one thing that you weren't expecting? And it's funny because the language is the biggest thing that I was not expecting, the language barrier, because I've done international travel before, but it was to Spanish speaking countries. And I took 5 years of Spanish in high school, so I understood a lot of what was going on. And I could have basic conversations with kids.
Right.
But to go to Kenya and to be surrounded by kids and I'm I don't even know how to say my name is. And it's funny, I love to tell the story. One of the first homes we visited on my first trip, I snuck away to see the kids and they of course came and swarmed me and I was and this was the first realization I have no idea what to say. I don't know how to communicate, And so the only thing I could say was my name. So I just kept saying Angela, Angela. And then I would point to them and then I'd be Bob, Sarah. And they're no, and then they're saying their names. And I'm trying. But then the only thing again I could say is Angela, Angela. And so that evening, every night our homes have devotions. And we had come in to have the devotions and the spokesperson in the front was saying, and guys, we have guests. And all the kids started going, Angela, Angela, Angela. And one of my, someone that was on the trip with me was how do they know your name? And in my head, I'm because that's the only thing I could say. So that's just kind of a funny little story. But I think, you even mentioned this before, but the language barrier is nothing when it comes to just being spirit filled and just being able to love people with your nonverbals and touch, and hugging and so I really got to see that displayed for me. So I look forward to hopefully getting to learn a little bit more of the language, but as well as just seeing how you can still love people without speaking their language.
That's powerful. That's powerful. And it's
Yeah.
just such a beautiful image. And I've been on mission trips myself, and it's very difficult, especially if you're trying to share something from the gospel and you have an interpreter. But you're right, those just every person all over the world has certain things. They know what a hug is, they know what a smile is,
Mm,
and there's these ways to just transcend language. I think that's just such a powerful image.
mm.
Now, you created a mission statement for yourself in high school. So first, let's just stop there. Most kids don't do that. Okay, they don't. So I'm impressed by that alone. But the mission statement, I'm even more impressed with, because it was to love any person who walked in front of you and show them a glimpse of how much God loves them. What made you to declare that?
Yeah, it was actually a youth group time where they're like they challenged us to create a mission statement for our life, and I just took it really seriously. But I just feel like it encompasses everything that I want to do and
Yeah,
what the Lord's gifted me in. And I love sharing it with people because truly, like, if we can love people, even strangers, in a way that they understand only a glimpse of how much God loves them, because God just loves us more than we could ever like humanly understand.
yeah, that's right.
And I just want that to be the statement of my life in the way that I'm loving, someone that's hurting me or a coworker or even these kids I've never met.
Yeah,
How can I show God's love to them again? Because I'll never be able to fully show that to them, but if I can just show a glimpse of it, that's
I
what.
love it. I love it. That's amazing. I
Yeah.
wish more adults had that as their mission statement.
Yeah.
For you to have done that at that time. I love the fact that your youth group put you to that challenge, because a lot of
Mhm.
times those types of things really do help us figure out, what it is that we really find important.
Yeah. Mhm.
Now, you gravitated towards working with middle schoolers. Why do you think that is?
I think there's the only answer is God, the Lord. Because when
Yeah.
I tell people that I love middle school, they look at me and they're like, "Are you okay? Like, is there something wrong with you?" And I'm like, "No. I do have a quirky, like, fun side to me, and I love
Mhm.
that that's just the same kind of atmosphere a lot of times when working with middle school students. In
Uh-huh.
high school, I worked as a day camp counselor and worked with like these really young kids, which was fun. And then I was like, man, this is really sweet. And then I mentioned in college I started working with middle school because
Right.
honestly it was a need at the time. They needed another female middle school
It
leader.
always is. Any church you go to, because they are a very, very specific group of kids.
It's true, but I just learned that they're in this sweet age of like they want to be adults and they want that
Hmm.
independence, but yet
Hmm.
they're still learning and they're still maturing. And to be able to come alongside parents and just listen but also have fun and tease these middle school students, I really fell in love with that age group working with them. And I did notice there were college students that would come in and they would work with middle school just because they had to for a few years before moving up to high school. And so
Hmm.
I always made it a statement like, no, like you guys, I'm like, you are my people. I love all of these middle school students. And it's been sweet, to see some of them graduate, move up to high school. And they're like, Angela, come with us. I'm like, no, I have to be
Yeah.
here. I love
Yeah.
these students and I love challenging them. Because I think
Yeah.
so often I see even, leaders and parents just kind of still looking at middle schoolers as very, very young and immature. But I love challenging their thinking and seeing kind of these ideas and especially their faith, making their faith their own. Because, just like when I
Yeah.
had to start defining my faith, they're doing the same thing, whether, they're in a Christian home or wherever they are, they're like, oh, I'm my own person. So does this come alongside me as my new
Hmm.
person?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I love that age.
Absolutely. Well, as somebody listening to your story kind of from a bird's eye view, I mean, immediately when you told me who you worked with, I thought, okay, that's when you were struggling and
Yeah.
that's when you chose for yourself. So
Yeah.
God takes our personal stories and he turns them into ministry.
Hmm.
And I'm sure you can connect with so many things that the kids are going through, because you can go
Hmm.
back to that place where you were going through a lot of hurt, and you
Yeah.
also can remember what it was like to choose for yourself. And so I'm sure you can minister to them in a way that somebody else can't. And
Yeah.
that's what's so beautiful about our personal stories and why I love to share them, because your story is going to reach people that mine won't, and my story is going to reach people that yours won't. And God has figured it all out that if we're willing to tell our story, we're always telling his story. And that is how the gospel is shared in
Yeah.
an intimate way. Yeah.
Mm.
Do you think that God was healing you while he used you to extend healing to others?
Yeah, I think, God always is healing you, especially as you're starting to
Yeah.
minister to others. It's hard to serve others when you're hurting yourself.
Yeah.
But there are times where he can use that well. I think by the time I reached college, like my first few years, like the Lord had really been healing my heart. And that I don't necessarily know if he was healing me through using the middle school students, because
Mhm.
I think that was more of the results of the healing.
Yeah.
Be able to love them, and that healing, I think I shared with this with you too, but the healing came from this family that I met in
Yes.
Ohio that just like loved me more than I could ever like even put into words, really. So, and it was, looking back on it, as a young person coming to college, it was actually a prayer of mine. I'm a journaler, so like looking back at journals, I was like, Lord,
Hmm.
please just have a family adopt me. I don't know what that means. I don't even know what I was looking for, but the Lord knew, because he brought this family alongside me that like they taught me what unconditional love looks like, because they'd have me
Yeah.
over to their house for dinner, and I'd be like, I need to like make them cookies, or I need to like invite them over to my like apartment,
Yeah. Yeah.
so but they showed me, they're like, no, we don't need anything in return. We just want to love you, and it's, I mean, extended way further than I could, ever even see. Like, I'm going to their house for Thanksgiving this year.
Oh, that's
So sweet.
amazing.
And they're like, you have to come. And I almost am like, I feel like guilty not coming, because they really are. I mean, guilty in a good way, because
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
really are just that family that has really shown me what a God honoring family looks like. So
That's amazing. I'm a journaler too, and it's so cool to go back. I go back with a different color pen and notice things that I didn't notice in the moment, because I think God works in these large chunks of time, and we're kind of used to these smaller chunks. And I think sometimes when you go back, you do see things that he answered that you didn't even realize that you had asked for, or you asked for it but you didn't really believe you were going to get it, or you couldn't figure
mm,
out how. And that's just such a beautiful story, that you said, like, I just want somebody to adopt me, and then these people came into your life and welcomed you into their home and showed you that unconditional love. And I love how God uses the body of Christ to kind of fill in
mm,
some of the places where we need extra support.
yeah, absolutely. And I think they're a redeeming part too of my
Yeah.
story. There's been
Yeah.
so many tears that have been shed, and hugs, and honestly, even my decision to move out to Pennsylvania here,
Yeah.
like they were a part of that decision. They were a part of, oh man, should I be leaving that? Or like,
Hmm.
oh, also like this is where God wants me, and they're encouraging me in that. And
Hmm.
yeah, it's just there's so many, and they also they just know me as a whole. They have countless, funny videos of me that I'm like, don't show that to anyone. But just truly getting to be myself, and then not only that, but them loving me as myself has been
Yeah.
really sweet.
That's a beautiful gift, and
Yeah,
everyone should have it, but sometimes we don't get that,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know. And I see you doing that with the way you talk about the kids that you work with. You're just loving them where they are, and
yeah,
they're enough who they are. They don't have to be anyone else, and you're just perpetuating that, which is beautiful.
yeah. Hmm.
Now, when you moved to Philadelphia, what was your roommate like?
Yes, I think my roommate is a huge blessing of my transition to be out here. People are like, "How has God shown up since being, in Philadelphia?" I've gotten that question, and every time my
Hmm.
answer is like, "My roommate, my roommate,"
No.
because she was connected as like a way distant person. Like I had never met her. It was like someone that knew someone that knew someone that knew someone, and I just went in full faith, because I'm like, it's too expensive to live out here by myself.
Right.
And so I truly just in faith moved out here. When I first met her, she's like, here's this gift basket of all these things about Philadelphia and all these treats, and here's like a 8-page document about all of the restaurants, and like, here are my parents' phone numbers and blah blah blah. And I just, it was truly in that moment that I was like, okay, this girl, like, she is thoughtful, she's sweet, she's kind, and that has been the testimony of my experience living with her. It's just been
Wow.
incredible.
What an amazing welcome. And I'm not surprised. I know Emily and her
Yeah.
family. That's actually how we met. Emily was on the show and she's a
Yeah.
friend, and she had told me about your story. So that's how we met. And her family is amazing. And just to see again, God's provision for you is just, it's abundant. It's over the top. It's
Mhm.
more than you could ever imagine.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and even, I mean, to extend into that, you know, I'll throw out, people should listen to her, her podcast too, because her story is amazing to listen to. And
Yeah.
her job as a photographer and graphic designer, type of role, she has been such a support even to me in my job.
Yeah.
And she has so sweetly I feel like, fallen in love with Chariots for Hope too. And she sponsors one of the kids here. And like, how cool to have a roommate that supports what I do so
That's
much as well. Just
awesome. It's
incredible.
awesome. And again, not surprised at all. Um, and I love seeing how your lives were dovetailed together. God knew exactly what support you needed from each other, what ways you could encourage each other, and that would be the safe place for you to do what he had for you to do. I think it's
Mm,
an awesome story.
yeah, absolutely.
Now, I like to ask people this question, not just because I'm curious, but because I like to see what God's doing in your life. So, are
Yeah.
you single right now?
Yes, I am. And I think that's a huge part of my story of getting to move out here and
Hmm.
getting to be so involved with what I'm doing and traveling to Kenya. I see it as something that has really allowed me to do that, which has been super sweet.
That's good, because a lot of times when I do talk to people who are in a season of singleness, they're not really very happy about it. But it seems like with you, you understand that right now you really wouldn't be able to have a relationship and still
Mhm.
do these things. That's good.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't be a person that's like, oh yeah, this is great, like 100%. I mean, there are times where comes and goes with,
Yeah.
especially with my desire to be hospitable and to have people over, and
Yeah.
like just some of those factors. But I do always come back to, like, the Lord knows what's best, and I just have to remind myself that, and He has placed people to support me in ways,
Yeah.
that almost, I mean, that a relationship, eventually might take on some of that role. But right now, like, God
Mhm.
really has people set up in my life to support me in that way. So it's been super sweet.
That's awesome. And his timing is the most important thing. I still remember my daughter, who is now happily married for years
Yeah.
and is definitely married to the person that God had for her, um, waiting during her season of singleness and being very intentional to look at the same things. And she was going to get her master's full time and working full time a
Mm.
job at the same time. There's no way. Like, how would you even have time to text, let alone really have a relationship? So I think it's
Mhm.
super important to keep that in mind. But she did certainly want to have a relationship. And
Yeah.
I hear that for you as well. But God will have that for you in the right time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now you found your church here in Pennsylvania.
Hmm.
I want you to tell the story. What happened when your first time walking in the building? What happened?
Yes. I think I think a lot of times we forget what it's like to walk into a church for the first time. So
Yes.
many times, you've grown up in the church or you've been attending for several years. But for me, and that was my experience in Ohio. I walked in, I was like, hi, I know everyone and can sit by
Yep.
anyone. But again, this was like a very humbling experience, and I felt all of these nerves, like, where should I sit? I don't want to sit by myself. What time should I get there? I don't want to be there too early, And I remember like just like trying to just calm myself down and I was journaling beforehand and I was like, Lord, like please let me not forget what this feels like because I can't even begin to fathom what it feels like to enter a church and having never even been in a church before.
Yeah.
For me, I've like grown up in the church, so I knew what to expect, but I still felt all those feelings. So I was like, all right, here I go, first Sunday. And I walk into the church and I just happened to like run into this older couple and just me, who I am, Midwestern. I was like, hi, good morning, and they're
Right.
like, hi. I'm like, I'm new here. Like, do you mind if I sit by you guys? And they're like, sure. And then, we just started talking and I sat with them. And then afterwards, we continued to talk and we found out that they live just down the street from where I live.
No way.
And they're the age to be like my grandparents. And they were like, oh, we should have you over for dinner. Let's get your phone number. And I was just so
Wow.
blown away by that because you would hope that that would be your experience entering into a church for like the first time, but it's
Yeah.
not always the case. And
No, it's
so
not.
it was I like just walked away like that was so sweet. And I have been over to their house and just last weekend I actually went to a craft show and I invited her to come with me
Oh,
because
wow.
they've just become so sweet and dear to me and they're like, we're your Pennsylvania grandparents. And yeah, super super cool how God works those things out and he encourages me in certain ways. So
Absolutely. I mean, you see the theme of these parent-like people or these couples, these healthy, caring husbands and wives that God keeps putting in your path. That's just beautiful. I
it's
mean,
super, yeah.
like, how do you feel? I mean, I would feel spoiled. I think it's
Yeah,
just, it's this other level of his care for you.
it's so true. I just see like his faithfulness and I love the word redeem too because I
Yeah.
I just see that redemption in all of these these people. I mean even Emily's family, so sweet. Like she's welcomed me and her parents have been so kind. Like her dad like comes over to like help with things in the house, which I mean obviously Emily's there. He's doing it for her too, but I know it's also there were a few times it was for me too and I'm just like,
Right.
man, it is so sweet. It is so sweet. And it's so funny because a lot of people again have asked so much about my transition out of here and I'm like, if I had to choose one word to describe it, it would be sweet. And I think even in this podcast you've heard me use that word so much because
Yeah.
truly like that is like the posture of my heart is just like it's been so sweet in the ways that
Yeah.
have been provided for.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful. I love it. I love it. And it should encourage other people. Your life, your story is an encouragement that if we hear God and we obey God, that He's not only going to provide what we can think of, but He's going to provide even more. And He's going to fill us with this sweet, abundant life that is
Mm,
just so well worth living. And you can hear that in every bit of your story.
mm, yeah.
Now, eventually, you got involved serving at church and you got into a community group. Can
Mhm.
you tell us a little bit more about how that all came to be?
Yeah, I think in moving out here, I there were feelings of loneliness, right? There were feelings of not knowing
Yeah,
people and kind of feeling disconnected, especially coming from a church where I was extremely involved.
yeah.
So I remember one Sunday I was like kind of feeling that again. And I'm like, Angela, you're literally not involved in anything. Of course you don't know anybody. It was like this like realization for me. And I had like people had known that I was interested in working with middle school students, and so I just reached out and was like, is there a need? Is there opportunity? And of course there was. And so getting to
Yeah.
get involved in that though is so refreshing because I get to do what I love and get to serve in
Hmm.
a way that I know the Lord's gifted me, as well as like meeting parents and that kind of way too. And the community group was a very similar thing. Like I was like,
Yeah.
all right, I need to get involved. Like here's something and it's been so sweet to see how like getting involved in middle school, getting involved in the community group, it started to like build these relationships with people a little bit deeper. So yeah, really
Yeah.
sweet.
Community is so important. And I think anytime I've been new at a church, serving has always been my way to really meet the people that God wanted to have in my life. You know, they were serving too, and community group is so important. What do you call it? Small group, community group, life group,
Yeah.
whatever you call it. Biblical community is something we're supposed to have, and we're not supposed to be off by ourselves, cut off and alone. So that's wonderful. I'm so glad you had the experience we're all supposed to have. You
Yeah.
found a church, you know, felt comfortable right away, and then you got connected in, and that's wonderful. Now, can you tell us some more about Chariots of Hope? I heard that they are launching a new baby sponsorship. I was wondering how our listeners might be able to help or get connected or give. I'm going to put some information in the show notes so that they can find on social media how to get in there. But tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah. So Chariots for Hope, we are an organization. We serve about 850 orphan and vulnerable children. So the reason we use orphan and vulnerable is because a lot of our children are fully orphaned, but there also are a lot of children we bring into our home that just come from, you know, really hard situations where their guardians can't fully take care of them. So we have about 8 homes total. So 6 of those are children's homes, and then 2 of those are baby homes, which
Wow.
yes, like I've been to the baby home, and everyone's jokes. They're like, it's like heaven on earth, because you know you're just surrounded by just all of these sweet, precious gifts from the Lord as babies. So that's kind of what we do as a whole. And I think the unique thing about Cherries for Hope is it's not just this institutionalized orphanage. So like that's kind of so that's why we use the terminology children's homes, because we do give them this holistic care. They call our managers like mom and dad, and they feel loved and they feel welcomed into this family. We also make sure that so they don't just reach a certain age and we're like goodbye. We love to set them up for success in whatever way that looks like. So whether that's going to trade school or college or university, and we just provide that support all the way there so that when they're ready to be released from our care, they can go back in their communities, and then they can in return love their communities, and live a full life. So that's a glimpse of what we do. We are launching this baby sponsorship in 2022, which is crazy. It's crazy to say those numbers.
It's right around the corner, actually,
It is. So we haven't released a lot of information about that yet, but we're going to start releasing that at the beginning of next year. So the main way to like get connected would be just following us on social media. That's like the best way to like kind of see what we're doing, kind of follow our ministry, like be like, ooh, what's this? It's very interesting, because I know we're going to be launching some other programs as well to fit the needs of donors that want to get involved. And then ultimately we also do have child sponsorship too, which is again unique. It's a little bit different. We allow our child sponsors to have a lot more of a personal relationship with their child in communicating with them and being able to send a package over every year. And so, yeah, super, super sweet.
That sounds very exciting. Like I said, everyone, the information will be in the show notes to go check that out. The last question I want to ask you today is my favorite question. Anyone that listens knows. So I just love the answers so much. If you could give your younger self any advice, what would it be?
Yeah. And, you know, I think it just comes back to the mission statement that I said in the middle of the podcast, because when you're young, it's true. Like it is a lot about your reputation and what others think of you. So if I could tell my younger self, I would just be like, Angela, just love people unconditionally. Like love people that are on the outside. Bring people in. Like I have such I love to bring people together. I love connecting people, and just like having people over, hosting events. I love planning parties, like Christmas parties and those kind of things. And I think I experienced a lot of fear of man in, you know, middle school and high school, to be like, oh, are they going to actually come? Those kind of things. So if I could just, you know, go back, I would be like, just love people, because it would mean so much more to love a person that is feeling unloved or hurting than it would be to love all these people that, you know, all they care about are being there, like their status or their reputation. So
I think that's amazing advice. And we really do need to meet in person, because I'm a scooper upper also. And I also have a gift of hospitality. I just love having people over and making little charcuterie boards and little,
Yes.
cute little things that, for their places. And for me, it's a weird season because I can't do that right now because I'm caring for my elderly parents and living with them. So we have to keep them a little safer. I am still able, to have people, but they can only be in the very one end section of the house. And I can't really do what I usually do, but I still find other ways to be hospitable. I think it's a personality, but I know what you mean. And I do look forward to the day that we meet in person when I'm able to be back at church in person as well.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Angela. I'm so grateful to have had this time with you. I'm very encouraged by how you're living your life and all the ways that God is using the places that He has redeemed to reach out to others and to provide love and just encouragement and healing and health to so many people. What you're doing is really just sounds so exciting and like you're loving every moment.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's such an honor to be able just to share what the Lord's doing. He's so great and so powerful and super evident in my life.
Absolutely. He sure is. And I love being able to have a platform where, I just want to share everybody's story. I can never run out of stories because I don't think that I'm ever going to run out of people. So
Yes, absolutely.
I love sharing them because we get to hear how good He is. And I'm just grateful that you're willing to share personal things. I know sometimes it's weird or hard, but it's so important to help other people connect.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you have an amazing day. I'm so thankful that you spent the time with us today, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Awesome. Thanks.
Hey, so I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. And I want to challenge you to go out today and to just take notice and to stop and really look around and find at least one good thing, one thing to be thankful for. If you do that today, you're going to find so many more things tomorrow without even trying. Because once you start, you begin to see what's always been there. And if you need a refill, you can come join me again for another cup. Make sure to subscribe and have an awesome day and go be grateful.